So, Berto, I asked people to send us short questions and little things that we might be able to comment on in culture and psychology, and I thought we would go over some of those so I can scratch them off my list because I'm a list scratcher. What do you say, Berto?
I love that idea.
This is the Psychology in Seattle podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Kirk Honda. I'm a therapist, a professor, and someone who messes up idioms by saying things like list scratcher.
List scratcher. My name is Humberto Castañeda, and I make Velcro with buttons.
So that's one of the best ones you've ever said.
What do you mean? It's my job.
So Love Sync. Have you heard of this thing?
Love Sync.
So it's blowing up on the internet. There's these people that are putting out a Kickstarter.
Okay.
Where they're selling this thing for $50-$60.
Uh-huh.
And it's these two little buttons, these little discrete buttons that look kind of high tech. And you put them on your nightstand.
Okay.
And when you press the button, it's an indication, you just do it quietly, you press the button. It's an indication that you're down to clown.
Oh.
And then if the other person doesn't press the button, then nothing happens.
Oh.
But within a time limit. If the other person presses the button too, quietly, then both of them light up in a certain way to indicate that you both indicated you're down to clown and you're ready to do the horizontal mambo.
But where do you put these buttons?
On your nightstand.
Oh, so it's with your significant other.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought this was like at some party. Or at a movie theater.
Yeah, I guess I should have stipulated. The implication is that this is when you're in a long-term relationship.
Okay.
And they say it's a cure or a solution for awkward initiations.
Oh, I like it. So I was thinking, because I was thinking it was more of my idea, I was going to wear one on my chest with a little sign saying, always on.
I mean, it might still be that case, really. But yeah, so the Kickstarter, they wanted to get to 7,500 and they already have 15,000. They have 328 backers, which isn't a lot on Kickstarter, but these are people who are, I think, giving like $50 a piece.
Yeah, I mean, that's significant.
And as of today, there are 19 days to go.
Wow.
They say it will enhance your romance, increase sexual frequency, avoid awkward rejection, and improve romantic communication.
Will it though?
So here's the hate. Lots of people are hating on it. The Verge wrote an article, Earth is dying and this couple is crowdfunding a sex button. And some tweets from people. I love to anonymously trigger my horniness device in the hopes that my partner has also triggered their horniness device and that the patent pending Love Sync technology finds consensus in our sexual desire spectrum ratings. Another person.
I love it.
If my husband spent $50 on a button to summon me to have sex with him, he wouldn't be having sex with anyone for a while.
I love it.
So people are saying it's impersonal, that it doesn't actually fix the communication problem. It actually adds to it.
Yeah, if anything, you'd be pissed off. You're like, damn it, why are you not pushing? Is this thing working? Do you see that I'm pushing the button?
People say it's not very romantic, and it, uses tech to solve a non-tech problem.
What about a bell? Ding, 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 ding.
Well, what do you think, Berto?
No, I at first I was like going along with the story thinking, oh yeah, that sounds, but now that I'm thinking about it, it's like, why would that make the problem better? Because you're sitting there and you're like, presumably you're in bed sitting there, okay, I'm going to do this. Tonight's the night when I press the button and she presses the button, or he. And I go, bing, waiting. Why on earth am I not going to be frustrated? Why am I not going to say something about it? It's like, you never press the button when I press the button.
Right. So it doesn't solve that problem by any means.
Right.
Exactly as you described it, which would be a common thing. Because there's a lot of, as a couples therapist who's worked with a lot of sexual issues in couples and in individuals, by the way, there is almost always a libido disparity in couples,
sure,
particularly long-term. There's almost always someone, if not universal, who even in period, sometimes it comes in periodic waves, like one person wants sex all the time for this few years, the other person, not all the time, but they want it more often. But often it's this consistent difference. And some people say it's by gender, and certainly on average it might be. But I've worked with plenty of heterosexual couples where the female member of the marriage was much more wanting to have sex more often, and the male was the one who was like, I'm not really into it tonight. So anyway, the point is that it's a very frequent thing. So I totally get the hate. I get the commentary. I get that people would say that this wouldn't necessarily solve your problems, and they make some good arguments. But really, I don't understand why the internet would really focus on this.
Sure, yeah.
There are so many silly products.
Well, to quote The Verge, the world is dying, and this is the hill you decide to die in.
Right. And to take meta, the world is dying, and you want to hack on this thing, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Instead of, anyway, the point is that there are a lot of silly products that deserve to be ridiculed.
Right.
Can you think of one? I can think of one very easily that is almost ubiquitous in our society that should be ridiculed all the time.
Really?
Can you think of
a Snuggie?
No, bottled water.
Oh, wait a minute. Interesting. Let's hear your perspective on this.
It's a complete rape on our world.
Because of the plastic.
The plastic, the production of it.
Okay.
One, when tap water is perfectly fine.
What about glassed water, though? Like in glass bottles?
Well, it's better. I mean, glass, from what I understand.
So you're not objecting to the water itself, or are you?
Well, I am, because if you're talking about glass water that is transported by trucks that pollute the environment, and then you have to dispose of the glass through trucks that pollute the environment.
So you'd be like more like buy a filter and shut up.
Yeah, or if your water isn't good enough, which it likely is, then and probably the same thing that's in the bottled water, then go to your government and your utilities and figure out a solution to that. But
I see. So I think
every expert who looks into this has come out with, and I've listened to these experts, have pointed out that our bottled water situation, when people buy, whatever you buy in bottles, it is one of the worst things that we are doing that would be so easily changeable.
Okay. I hear that.
We didn't do it 20 years ago, and we were fine. Everyone wasn't falling over dead from not drinking bottled water.
Right. Well, I mean, that's not universally true. There were severe problems with water hygiene across the world. But
across the world.
Yeah. So bottled water in some parts of the world is actually a lifesaver.
Okay.
Yeah. But let's take it. Let's take it in the modern world. Yeah. Let's take it in the modern world. I hadn't considered your point, because I actually do buy, not all the time, but I sometimes buy these come in glass bottles. But it's a specific water that is bottled in the East Coast, and so clearly it has to be transported. And you're right, that is causing a lot of pollution to do that. So I hadn't considered that. That's good for opening my mind. The reason I like to filter my water, at the very least, is not that it's got bacteria or anything. It's just the fluoride and chlorine.
Great. And by all means, or lobby your politicians to do that for you, because you could do it in a much more environmentally safe way. One, don't put the fluorine in it to begin with.
Well, you might need to, but let's just get a filter. A filter can work wonders.
Sure. So. Or have two different taps, whatever. Sure. The point is that bottled. So there are ridiculous things in our society that are actually damaging our world.
Yeah, that's fair.
That the internet should be focusing on.
I didn't even think about that. Good point.
And there's countless others.
Yeah.
Snuggies.
Well, like overly eating meat products.
Yeah. Yeah. But here's the thing that I think a lot of people that are criticizing this, in my estimation, don't understand. And let me explain it from my narcissistic soapbox. Long-term couples struggle with this sort of problem.
Okay.
It's very frequent, and it can get to the point where some couples never have sex at all.
Wow.
So we're not talking about couples that are, when you first meet, often for allosexual people into having sex, they will, in the beginning, in the first year or two or three, they have sex pretty much as often as possible.
Right.
Or at least it's not
frequently.
They have frequently, and there's no complaints by either person.
Right.
But after 5, 10, 40 years, things cool down a little bit. 1, 2, you have kids. 3, you have careers and stress.
You get older.
It's not so, you're not so lustful for your partner as you once were. It's just natural for that to happen. And maybe conflict happens around sex.
Right.
Maybe some awkwardness and rejection, maybe even traumatized from previous relationships or something. Differences in libido. And there are problems. And to just say, well, why don't you just talk about it? It is not that fucking easy.
Right.
When you have all these issues, particularly when things go down into a certain rut. I mean, I've worked with couples who hadn't had sex for 5, 10 years. And even before that, it was like a slow death, before that. I've worked with gay and lesbian couples as well. I mean, everyone experiences this. So the people who are criticizing this, I suspect, they are not old enough to have had a relationship long enough to experience this.
I see.
And they're just like, oh, this is so dumb. Now, am I saying that this is some wonderful product? No. But what I'm saying is it's like, well, there are a lot of people suffering, and, maybe for 10,000 couples in the United States, this will actually be some slight assistance to them. And is that worth $50 to that couple? Yes. Right. Is this something that's going to work for a lot of people? No. But there are so many people suffering from this. We kind of need all the help we can get. Now, of course, a better approach is to go to a therapist who specializes in this and help the communication. Right. Once you get the communication going, once you address the traumas and the awkwardness and the resentments and the fears and the weird meanings that people will attribute to things, she rejected me. That means that she thinks I'm a fat slob. And it's like, no, it's not what it means. And working on that, you can absolutely help. But, in lieu of that, or maybe even in addition to that, a device like LoveSync could actually be, really helpful. And to ridicule it, I think, is a form of ignorance and marginalization to couples that actually suffer from this sort of thing.
All right, I buy it. You know what we need then? I'll email the LoveSync guys. When you press the button, it does 2 things. It notifies the other party, and so they have the choice. But if they don't press that button in 5 seconds, a screen comes up and your therapist shows up, and you have a conversation about it.
Yeah. Yeah, like I said, I've worked with couples like this before who have really had issues with this, because in the advertisement, they sort of make fun of how sometimes it's really awkward to initiate. What do you say? That doesn't seem silly or weird. Plus, you're kind of putting yourself out there, and if the other person doesn't want to, it hurts more. And if you just press this button and they reject you, it doesn't hurt as much, is the idea maybe for some people. And of course, it could hurt just as much depending on how you took it. But for some people, maybe it wouldn't. And I've actually done this with couples before. This is actually a major component of trying to rekindle a sexual relationship between people, is helping them to initiate things without being afraid of it being awkward or rejecting, and building that trust. Because there's nothing wrong with rejecting sex, but there is something wrong with rejecting it and making the other person feel like shit.
Yeah, right.
You can say to the person,
no, you slob.
Yeah, or just like, I'm busy, or really short answers. Nothing to be like, oh my God.
I'm so sorry.
I'm so sorry. I love it that you want to have sex with me.
For the 5th year in a row, I have a headache.
But, so I work on a lot of these kinds of things, cuddling and showering. And one of the things that I've found actually pretty almost universal success with is scheduling. Either putting it on this like, okay, it's Sunday night. When are we going to have sex this week? You actually put it on the schedule. Right. Or you do it the same time every night. I actually work with a couple, or same time every week. I actually work with a couple who actually came up with this on their own as we were exploring this. And they decided that they were going to have sex every Friday night.
Okay.
Because they spent the weekend together.
Right.
And when they had sex at the beginning of the weekend,
it made it better.
Yeah. It's, if they waited till Sunday, the two of them would be a little distant, a little
Right.
disjointed. Maybe one person's like, are we going to do it Sunday? If you just, quote unquote, get it out
out of the way.
yeah.
Go for it.
It just, and they found that schedule really helped. They were just like, there's no question. We have sex every Friday night. Now, this couple didn't have, their kids had moved out, so it was easier to make that schedule. If you have kids, sometimes you got to put it on the schedule. You got to pull up your Google calendars and you got to say, okay, where's a time when the kids are at school or at a babysitter and we have an hour together and we're not going to be too tired or full with food. And
Can you say things like, all right, so Friday nights are sex nights with or without you? Like, or can you walk around the house and paint your ass red like baboons? Does that help?
with a big bullseye. So a patron wrote us in, I'm sorry if I forgot who it was. I lost the notes that indicated who it was. So thanks for writing that in. They actually sent us the links and everything, and I wouldn't have known about it otherwise. Anonymous patron wrote in and asked us, I was wondering if you could give some insight on the statement, I was just kidding, after saying something hurtful or offensive. For example, if someone blatantly makes fun of your clothes or hairstyle, and in response to your offended or hurt reaction, the person says, come on, I was just kidding. Sometimes it makes me feel that I'm being silly for being offended. But most of the time, I feel confused and even more hurt that they might have said something that was mean. The most recent occurrence was when I was having a conversation with my husband about pressing the snooze button on the alarm. I have a hard time waking up in the morning and have a bad habit of snoozing my alarm once or twice, which affects him since he also hears these alarms and it wakes him up too. At one point in the conversation, he says, yeah, it's really selfish of you, which really hurt my feelings. I must have had a sad reaction, and I asked him if he really felt that way about me, and he replied, I'm just teasing. Do you think it's common for people to use this excuse as a way of getting something off their chest and they're too afraid to own it? Maybe they really are just kidding, and I simply just don't get their sense of humor. What do you think, Berto?
What a dumb question. Just kidding. Just kidding. No. First of all, not a dumb question. So I think there's at least two varietals here. I don't think that just kidding comes in one size, because there is literally someone is like, where should we go for dinner? It's like, let's go to McDonald's. Just kidding, right? Like, that's just kidding. I'm just kidding, right? And granted, that's not offensive. Maybe it's offensive if you like McDonald's or something. But then there is the one where it's really, I said something I meant, but now I need a social way to diffuse it. So it's like, you kind of look fat in that. Just kidding. So those, I could totally understand the point, because like, wait a minute. First of all, the thing you said is something that could be hurtful, and maybe there's a history there with that and stuff like that. And so you don't get to just throw that out and then with a statement of just kidding, make it look like I wasn't hurt. Like, imagine some more extreme examples, like, I'm going to murder you tonight in your sleep. Just kidding. Or like, or racial things or really horrible things. You don't get to just throw out just kidding and make whatever you just said go away.
Right.
So I think that there's gradients to this.
Yeah, I'm going to put two varietals, as you said, in one of your varietals.
Okay.
So I'm going to have two
Sub-varietals.
So yeah, you have the varietal where it's not aggressive and not hostile.
Right.
And just literally the person is just kidding.
Joshing.
But you have the other one where it is aggressive. This is what we call passive aggression.
Right.
It's aggression, but it's passive. People often misuse that term, passive aggression, when they're actually referring to just flat out aggression.
Like, here you go. We're explaining things again, Honda. Just
Narcissistically on my... just kidding. Good.
Just kidding.
So the first subvarietal is a retracted aggression that I'm thinking. That's my term.
Yeah.
Is where you are having an emotional reaction and you say something out of that emotion, and then you very quickly regret having said that and you went too far. And you don't have a protocol based on your upbringing in all likelihood to say something like, oh, I went too far.
Yeah.
And instead you try to make up for it by saying, "Oh, I was just kidding."
Just kidding. You know I don't mean it.
Right. And actually, I want to just talk about this for a little bit because this is something that I don't think I've ever verbalized, that I've been thinking about for 15 years plus, which is that every once in a while, I hope everyone experiences this, or I don't hope, but I hope I'm not unique in this way, in that I will say something and instantly regret it, and then I'll wait too long to make up for it when I could have easily just made up for it in the moment.
I see.
Like saying something like, "Oh, sorry." Like one of the things that I'll do is I consider it sort of a nerdy thing where I'll just blurt something out and I'm not eloquent in the moment, and then I'll suddenly realize based on the reaction of other people that I was too energetic or something, and it's too nerdy is the word that I have for it.
Uh-huh.
And then like 10 minutes later, I'll be mulling it over in my head, and I'll be like, well, should I say something now? But it's 10 minutes later. How great would it have been if I just would have said something right after? Like, sorry, that came out wrong. Like, and I've said this to myself. I've tried to coach myself, like, just say right away, sorry, that came out wrong.
Right.
Just say, I'm sorry, that came out wrong. That was too intense, or that came out weird. Sorry, let me rephrase that. Or let me tone that down a little bit. I just, every like 1% of the time I manage that. And 15 years ago, I never managed that.
Right.
I'll give an example. And if any of my colleagues at Antioch are listening, please take this as an apology for what happened earlier this week. So we had a baby shower for a colleague, and we submitted our baby pictures for that game where you try to guess who was who.
Yeah.
Well, I purposely picked a picture that would throw people off the scent, because as a half Asian with a humongous head, it would be super easy to detect that it was me. You know what I mean?
Sure.
At least that's what I thought. And so I actually picked a picture of me and my mom, where my mom is like not only blonde, but like white blonde and blue eyes and very pale skin. And then I am an infant, a baby, and she put a blonde wig on me.
Oh.
But it's clearly a wig because I'm probably 4 months old, and I have this huge head of,
how would you have all that hair?
Of blonde hair.
Right.
And I thought, no one's going to guess this is me.
Right.
And I kind of got a little kick out of that because, when I think about it, it's a history of everyone just assuming that both of my parents look like me skin tone wise.
Sure.
When my mom is super blonde and blue eyes. You know what I mean? And so it's, I always kind of like throwing people off. Like, look, you can't judge a book by its cover.
Right.
And in terms of race and ethnicities, particularly for mixed people. It's sort of like when people first saw Obama's mom, people are like, whoa, that's a white woman. You know what I mean? And so I like that because I don't want people assuming things about things like that. Anyway, so I think that I had a little bit of energy around that, a little bit of like resentment that I didn't notice in the moment. And so anyway, where everyone's guessing and no one is guessing that's me. And people are like, Kirk, are you on this thing? I was like, I don't know. You're just going to have to. And then everyone's looking at this because one of my colleagues is half Asian as well.
Okay.
And everyone was like, that must be Kirk. And I was like, of course, you're going to go to the obvious Asian-y looking kid, you know? And so when they announced it, they're like, okay, with the real person of this,
real Slim Shady.
And I stand up and everyone's like, whoa. And then I just blurt out, I have a white mother.
Oh, awkward.
And and everyone goes silent.
Oh,
this is like 20 people.
Oh, awkward.
Just goes silent, and I'm like, wait, what's happening? And I'm
oh no.
I'm like, and then fast forward about I don't know a couple hours, and we're in a different room, and one of my and we have a lot of new professors too, so a lot of these people are they don't know me very well, and one of the new guys says, is telling someone else, yeah, we had a good party. And, Kirk basically called us all racist for he said that, which I loved.
Right.
Because I'm like, okay, good.
That diffuses it a bit.
Yeah. But I still
That's something I would have said.
I still didn't have the right thing to say.
Yeah.
And what I wish I would have said, I wish I wouldn't have said anything. I would just be like, yeah, that's me. I threw you off the track or something. Or when I did stand up and say, I have a white mother, and everyone's like, huh? And I would be like, oh, that came out wrong. Sorry. I'm not calling y'all racist. I'm just saying I purposely picked a picture to try to throw people off the set. I wish I would have said,
right.
But I
clarified.
didn't. So I think for some people, they will say like, yeah, it's really selfish of you that you have the alarm, that you keep pressing snooze. And they're like, whoa, that came out a little strong. Yeah. What I wanted to say was something more nuanced. Like, I wish you wouldn't do that, but I don't think you're a terrible person. I just kind of wish you would I sometimes in the morning I'm like, I'm really tired and I wish I would have got another half an hour of good sleep. And I don't hate you, but but I wish I wouldn't have said, yeah, it's really selfish of you. So I'm just kidding. I'm just joking. So the other sub-varietal is veiled aggression, actual, meaningful, intentional aggression. They're angry and they're hurt and they want to express it, but they don't really trust the other person to hear them. So in this example with the alarm, I could see a scenario where he's chronically annoyed with you hitting snooze. Yeah. And I just have to say, anonymous patron, I'd be annoyed with that too. And I've been there before.
Okay.
It's like, you can snooze all you want after I've woken up.
Sure.
You can snooze all you want in your own room.
Right.
But if I'm in the room with you...
You're snoozing me.
Right. One, your alarm should be quiet enough that it doesn't wake me up.
Right.
Or...
Unless you've agreed you have the same wake up.
Or I'll give you one shot and I'll wake up too.
Yeah.
But if you keep hitting goddamn snooze, like I'm really protective of my sleep.
Yeah, totally.
And because it's not just a luxury, it's a physical need.
Right.
And so I could see, so let's say he's a little annoyed and he wants it to stop and he wants to say something and it's building in him over time.
Right.
For weeks and weeks and weeks, maybe years. He's just like, I want to say something. I want her to stop doing that. And it's building inside of him because he doesn't trust the situation well enough to say something, whether that has anything to do with the anonymous patron or not, is irrelevant. It's the pressure's building in him. He starts telling a story about like, you're so selfish. When in reality, it's like, well, you haven't said anything yet. So, and then one day he just explodes with this hostile statement. That's so selfish of you. Right. And then he immediately thinks, oh, that's unfair, but I kind of believe it.
But I don't know how to explain it.
And I don't have a protocol, I don't have a way, and I'm worried that I'm going to lose you because I don't want you to leave me. That's one of the reasons why I didn't say anything in the first place, because I'm afraid you're going to leave me. And so I'll just say I was teasing because it's the shortest thing I can say to get out of this.
Right.
And then he resumes to stifle his feelings.
So, I mean, I will say I've definitely done the first version. I've probably done both versions of that. But certainly the first version where I feel I want to say something, but I don't want the confrontation. So it'd be like, knowing you're probably going to not bring any chips to the party. Just kidding. But am I kidding?
Yeah, right. So the intent is there, and just saying you're not kidding it doesn't erase it.
Right.
The solution, if you're a victim of this, is to actually, particularly if it's a spouse, and my recommendation is, if that person is in therapy and they bring this up with their therapist, then they can work on this. But if they're not, it's kind of up to you to do what you can do to change it, which is to go to that person and just say, so when you say just kidding, sometimes I feel like you're not just kidding.
Right.
And what I'll say to that is, if you have something you want to tell me, I just want you to know that you can tell me.
Yeah.
And if, like with the alarm thing, I get the impression that you actually might have wanted to tell me that you didn't like it and you wanted me to change that. And which I totally get. And if you would have told me to change it, I would have absolutely honored that. You didn't have to, you could have said that the first time it bothered you. I don't know. Is that how you feel? Do you want me to change that? Well, yeah, it's, it's pretty selfish of you to do that, or whatever they say, Yeah, I totally want you to change that. Don't you think it's sort of dumb that you hit snooze? Okay, I agree. I just wish you would have told me a long time ago so that you wouldn't have built up so much anger about this. But I get it now, and I hear you, and I will absolutely stop doing it. And thank you for telling me,
And then at the end of it, say, just kidding.
So let's take a break. And when we get back, let's talk about some more of your short questions. What do you say, Berto?
Let's do it.
All right, we're back from the break. So if you want to become an upper level patron, you get different benefits. At $20, you get the mug, which we will personally mail to you. It's a wonderful coffee mug. I use it every day. It's perfect, I think. Perfect handle, perfect size, not too big, not too small. And if you're a $35 patron, which I might raise up to $50, I'm not sure, you get a free hour of consultation with me, education consultation. I wouldn't have originally thought that would be anything that anyone would want, but on the survey, people were like, if you want to spruce up the benefits to patrons, I'd love to have some consultation time to get my specific questions answered, kind of a thing. I can't provide therapy in that way, but I can provide education.
At what level do they get access to the secret club?
That's a secret.
Oh.
So if you're looking for archived episodes, this episode is probably number 850-ish. 700 of our episodes, or 500 to 700 of our episodes, are only available on the website. And for those of you who primarily listen to the podcast on your phone, you can actually go to the website on your phone and listen to episodes on your phone. It's it's like a convenient, it's like another app for the podcast. So I encourage you, if you're looking to listen to older episodes, and when people really like the podcast, they want to listen to everything. In fact, a guy emailed today and said that he has gone back to the very first episodes and is starting to listen to those.
Wow.
Which I can't imagine the contrast in style and competence to today.
But there is a freshness about it, so
I guess.
And a relevance, because all those topics that we did that were like news.
Yeah. Also, buy my book, Multi-Role Clinical Supervision. Also, join the Facebook fan group. You can tweet us. You can Facebook us. You can Instagram us. And also, if you are... Also, I'm available for hire as a consultant, and I'm guessing Berto is too. I don't know what your price is.
I will consult. I will help you overcome your deepest, darkest problems.
Oh, boy.
By the way, so you know how you have an Oscar party coming up?
Yeah.
So,
well, this will be posted after the Oscar party. So,
did you know how you had an Oscar party that was coming up?
Yeah.
Well, someone I know is cramming for that Oscar party.
Yeah.
And they were trying to watch Black Klansman.
Yeah.
And they were halfway through watching it when they realized that they thought it was the stylistic decision to make it look like a 60s movie.
Oh, no.
And then they looked up, and there was a movie in the 60s called Black Klansman, 2 words. It was not Black KKK Klansman. And so they were watching a completely different movie for like half of it.
Half?
Yeah, they got halfway through. They just thought that it was done in this 60s style.
How would you not know? Because 60s movies, particularly 60s, because things took a turn in the 70s, how would you not know that it wasn't the actual movie?
Yeah. They were like, it was very melodramatic.
Oh, my God.
You know how sometimes they do movies like that silent movie that came out a few years ago that we were railing about recently?
The Artist.
The Artist.
Yeah. Well, now I'm curious about that movie. It's like, what in the 60s, what was it about? Anyway.
Right.
So someone wanted us to talk about renewable energy. What do you think, Berto?
Wow, that's a fantastic topic. I actually think, so in some other countries, this is not only like a topic, it's a thing that they've been doing at a policy and governmental level for decades now. Here it's sort of like let's talk about that.
Right. I mean, we're definitely doing things, but not nearly what other countries are doing.
Right.
because of our politicians.
Yep.
It's that simple.
Coal and oil.
Yeah. Yeah. What percentage of the world energy is made by renewables like biomass, geothermal, hydro, solar, wind? What percentage of
the world's?
Of the world?
Today, oh man, I hope it's like 40%.
22. Coal. What do you think percentage coal?
60?
40.
40.
So 40% of the world's energy is by coal.
Well, technically, coal is renewable.
Yeah. In what,
In the
millions of
long
years?
scale.
Natural gas, which is also problematic, but not as much as coal, but still problematic.
30%.
21.
21%.
Nuclear.
Oh, ugh. 15%.
Close. 11. Oil.
How many percentages are we left now?
Not
20,
much.
60. Wait, out of the total? But if coal was, didn't you say coal is 40%?
Yeah. Oil is 4%.
4%?
Yeah, it's not
much.
much.
Because that's only powering cars and stuff like that.
Right. So,
Right.
from what I understand. So, yeah, we're doomed. Background level extinction is just one effect of our pumping of greenhouse gases into and other pollutants into the environment. Background level extinction. How many species do you think are going extinct? So background level extinction is without us being alive. How many species go extinct every year, like just naturally, so to speak?
Oh, I see. How many to like a total number?
Yeah.
Oh, geez.
On average.
1,000.
No, just 10.
Okay.
If it was 1,000, then we don't evolve that quickly. So about 10 species a year typically will go extinct, according to most estimates. How many?
That's across insects and everything?
Yeah.
Okay.
10 species.
Okay.
I mean, it seems like not that much, but when you think about eons,
Sure.
right? Because that's when you measure these sorts of things. Like if you count that up over 10,000 years,
it's a lot of species.
Yeah. Today, how many species are going extinct per year? So normally it's 10. How many species are going extinct in today's
Oh my God, 100.
50,000.
What the what?
50,000.
We're so done.
We're doomed. It's already happening.
So do you think this is why there are no signs of life that we've found anywhere?
It could be.
Like people just...
The other thing is the Larger Hadron Collider could actually blow up the Earth because we don't know. But
but let's say you get to enough development as a species in some planet, and you find these very efficient energy sources, and you just start using them, and then that leads to your planet no longer being survivable.
Of course, there's no way to know the answer to this question, but the speculation that this or some other, like a mass nuclear winter or some other thing that emerges
As a
universally
side effect
prior to our ability to handle these things seems possible. By 2050, which is in a very short, 29 years, half of all species will be extinct. Half.
Wow.
So pick two animals, one of them will be extinct. Now, of course, this is including insects and sea creatures and bacteria, but half of all species will be completely gone, never to return.
Right.
This is a mass extinction event similar to the Cambrian, similar to when the dinosaurs died off. This will have sweeping ecological effects.
Do you think that is it maybe part of this why there is a set of folks that maybe know this and then they're basically now like nothing we do can matter at this point, and so let's just go out with a bang?
No. What the experts will say that I hear is we're doomed, but we're even more doomed if we don't do something. Like there's still time to save those 50%. If we do nothing, the last 50% will also be dead.
Yeah, totally.
So we can absolutely do something now, and the thing we have to do is stop somehow pumping, greenhouse gases into the environment and finding some way of quarantining those things, which lots of people are working on. And
how do you like, we got to quarantine the US in a way because, and I mean, you could make an argument for other countries as well, but there doesn't seem to be a way for us, even if we elected Obama, and that still wasn't enough.
Because Obama wasn't good enough on environment. That's
what
why.
I mean. And that wasn't even good enough.
Well,
let alone now. We're reversing the other direction.
Obama wasn't as progressive as other
That's what I mean.
Yeah.
That was Obama.
So what we need is a progressive.
Yeah, I know.
Which could happen in this next election.
Could happen. But we need the Senate and Congress to be there too.
Right. So God knows, but it's within grasp. It's not impossible. Yeah. I don't agree that it's impossible. Other countries have made, and it's not like that strange of a thing. Well, what we have to do is, we are the biggest economy that has ever existed, and we're bigger than China. We're bigger than Germany. We have a massive amount of resources and technical know-how and power, and if we just dedicated 100 times more to this, we would not feel it in our lives in terms of having to sacrifice more. We just have to spend. How about we only buy half the tanks that we're buying every year? How about we stop subsidizing oil companies half as much? We would have all of that money, and we would accelerate the innovation for wind, for solar, for geothermal, for nuclear. Nuclear isn't great, but it's a lot fucking better than coal and oil and natural gas.
Yeah.
It's not great. It has its own problems, but if we don't have anything else, nuclear is a much better option, and we need to start doing this. And people are like, well, I'm recycling. I'm here to tell you, most of that shit's going into the ground. And two, there's a lot of space for shit to go in the ground. Like that, the recycling landfill thing is not nearly as important as particularly a runaway greenhouse effect.
Well, but
short of that, a mass global, like, imagine the entire equatorial region of the world becoming a vast sand dune desert.
Yeah.
And crops in that we consider to be the bread belt of the United States or Russia completely become unable to produce food.
Yeah.
And the only place you can start growing food is inside, which is really hard to do for 10 billion plus people.
Yep.
Or in new sort of weird regions in like Greenland and Upper Canada or something.
Yeah.
Like, this is not good for anybody.
Yeah. Which, by the way, that's I've said this before. The part that I really never understand about the folks in power mostly is that they must be in such big denial about this, because how can you, just being very selfish, let's say you're a very selfish person and you just want comforts for you probably also want them for your family. It's so rare to find someone that really doesn't care about their family.
It is so much more convenient to go into denial when you have someone who is drinking alcohol every day, and it's been a slippery slope to drinking when they wake up in the morning, or at least as soon as they get off work.
Yeah.
And they never really set out to be this sort of person, but they are. And they're like, well, I'm not as bad as I used to be. And, I function. I deserve it. I go to work every day. And you know what? My spouse, they're kind of a jerk anyway. And I need this for myself to cope. There are so many things to tell yourself that are available to us to sustain whatever life that we feel like we need to, and to avoid our fears. And the vast majority of Americans, politicians and otherwise, are committing this, even though they've been told plenty, particularly politicians, my God, how many times. Now, are some people just flat out evil? Like, well, I'm going to be dead in 10 years, so I don't give a crap. Absolutely, that could be possible. But I think most of them are in denial. Also, the politicians follow their constituency. So if their constituency is calling for jobs in oil and coal specifically for some people, and their constituency, is that the right word, constituency?
Yeah.
And their constituency, almost none of them are calling for environmental actions, pro-environment actions, then, well, that's their job.
But I actually don't see that. I see, you made a point in another episode that I think applies here, which is, I actually think that in this case is the constituency being fed the story that they need to be fed, and then they believe that story. So, the story in this case is because of the money interest, which is there's a ton of money in oil still. There's a ton of money in coal still, right? So the story is that's American. We want true American supremacy, and nothing's more American than oil and coal jobs. And that's all this foo-foo, new like sun things and all that stuff is not American. And so then you get fed that, and then you start believing it. And then,
Yeah, certainly. I mean, it's certainly a factor, and ridiculous. And yeah, we're heading towards a cliff, and we don't really know what's on the other side, and we're not doing much. People are doing things, and there's success stories, but our pumping of just one thing we're doing, which is terrible, which is pumping CO2 in the atmosphere, is ever increasing. Even if we stabilized our current rate, we're still doomed. So there's so many things that have to change about us. And I'm through fucking taking responsibility for it myself. Like, I could say, okay, I should stop using electricity. I should stop driving my car. I should stop buying products and stuff. Sure. And I do that. I think I do a half-hearted version of this. But even if we all do that, it's not going to change. It's not going to change anything. What we need is governmental, worldwide level, like the Paris Accord and other things like that weren't enough to begin with, by the way, to completely in a short amount of time, which is attainable, alter the entire power structure, the energy policy and the energy production of our world. It's possible, and there's evidence. Every year, solar is getting more efficient, more cheaper, more economy of scale. And the biggest economy in the world is like, well, fuck it, it's not really happening. Like,
well, but it's a minority of people in this country
that are in power.
Attitude.
Yeah.
Well, and that support them. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, I think you probably have. I think if you ran a poll, it is probably like 30 to 40% of people would say that it's not a problem.
So MD wrote in and wanted us to pick a patron at random, and then Berto, you would give them a drawing in the mail.
Woo!
Because on the survey, people were like, as a patron benefit, in addition to consultation, another thing I'd really love is a personalized drawing from Humberto.
I'll do it.
So
who do I have to draw for?
Well, I'm going to pick the person. So I'm looking at our most newest patrons.
Okay.
And I'm looking for someone who has their photograph, because I always like to see the person. And I'm also looking for someone who has their address. And that person is Jana from Texas.
Woo!
Jana from Texas.
Gets a personalized drawing.
Gets a personalized drawing for Berto. What are you going to draw for patron Jana from Texas?
I'm going to draw a scene from He-Man.
Okay. Next thing to do here is patron Torin wrote in and said, Berto, what do you think about the Kevin Spacey Let Me Be Frank video? This is from a while ago.
Yeah. It's horrible to say, but I really enjoyed it. That guy can act. It's crazy.
Right. So Kevin Spacey got in trouble during the Me Too movement for having been outed for being a sexual harasser in a very aggressive, nasty, abusive way toward men and women, or just men?
I think just men.
And he was ostracized from Hollywood and cut from his hit TV show House of Cards. And then a couple months ago, he records this video at home of himself labeled "Let's Be Frank," and he's basically channeling the character of Frank Underwood from House of Cards, and he is addressing the camera like he does in House of Cards.
Right.
And
breaking the fourth wall.
And he's basically saying, "Let's be frank." And what was he saying in the video?
Well, so that's the thing is, it could be taken from at least two different contexts. On the one hand, if you just, let's say this controversy had never happened, but that let's say they had still done this last season without him, and that he had died in the show. In that case, this would have been like this brilliant, surreal thing where he's talking about how maybe he's not really dead. And did you think it was really that easy that he would just die after all that? So from that perspective, that was sort of the character he was playing. Right. But then, of course, there's the reality of what happened to him. And from that perspective, every word he said also applied. It was like, do you think it was really that easy to get rid of me? Do you really believe everything you've been told? And so from that, he was sort of implying like, there's a lot more to this story that you don't know. And you shouldn't believe everything. And I'm coming back, and and you want me back.
Yeah, it's hard to say. And you're reminding me of the message, which is good. It's hard to say what was happening and what his intention was. But given what we know about his personality as a person who would feel okay with chronically scaring human beings into having sex with him, and seemed to get off on that, and that like is in the context of him being abusive verbally to people on sets, and being a general, real horrible human being. I suspect that he has a personality that makes it difficult for him to take criticism and really empathize with other people. Yeah, and he released this video from that place. I don't know that, but it seems there's some evidence there.
Some conspiracy theorists on the web were saying that he was sending a message to the enclave of pedophiles and in the, out there in power.
That's not a conspiracy. That's just a theorist.
Well,
it's not a conspiracy.
Well, no, they do. That is conspiracy because it's tied to the whole Clintons thing and the Pizzagate and all that stuff.
What?
Yeah. This is what they were saying. Hey,
so the Alex Jones people.
Basically, he's sending a message to them saying like, you better be careful. I know you did this to me, but if you don't stop, I'm gonna come out with more truths, and you know what those truths are.
Oh God. Yeah. Patron Torin asked a really great question that has nothing to do with psychology. He asked us to talk about the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. So nice. Recently inducted was Nirvana and Pearl Jam. Did you know that?
Wait, recently?
I think so.
Wow.
Yeah. Because
how long does it take?
Well, to qualify, you need to be 20 years after your first album.
Oh, okay. So that is a hard requirement in terms of time. I didn't realize that.
Right.
Okay.
So Nirvana and Pearl Jam, their first albums were in the early 90s, late 80s. So it coincided with...
Cool. Absolutely deserve to be in there.
Yeah. Nominated is The Cure.
What do you mean nominated?
So...
They didn't get in?
No. But they've been nominated.
What?
Radiohead.
Wait. Come on. I could see an argument about The Cure. How can Radiohead not get in?
No, The Cure to me is way more classic and long-standing.
For me, I would agree with that. But I think for the mainstream, it
and
might not
older,
be true.
by the way,
sure,
and influential,
sure. But I'm surprised that Radiohead didn't make the cut.
Stevie Nicks is nominated. Well,
By herself? Okay, fine.
You're maybe confusing. They're being nominated, which means they're likely to get in.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought they were nominated but didn't get it.
No. I'm glad you cleared that. Nominated means
Okay, well then
they're
great.
They're up for
I'm
consideration.
glad. I'm surprised that they wouldn't be.
Well, we'll get into
Some of the upsets.
Yeah. So Stevie Nicks from Fleetwood Mac is nominated, and the Zombies, which is kind of weird. I mean, yeah, it's like great, but they're not anything on the level of The Cure and Radiohead and Nirvana and Pearl Jam. Don't get me wrong, I love some of the Zombie songs, and they were really quite unique for their time.
Yeah.
So, Patron Torrin asks, do you feel like this is a legitimate cultural institution or simply a money-making scheme? What do you think, Berto?
Well, I mean, it's probably a little bit of both. I think there's nothing wrong and actually very interesting about honoring very influential or impactful musicians over time. And I'm sure they make money in the process. It's like a lot of fundraisers are that way, Yeah.
It's similar to the Oscars. Yeah. There's this notion that the Oscars represent the people or something, and they don't. It's a group of people who vote on that.
And it makes a ton of money.
And it represents those people, and they're not representative of everybody. In a similar way that the Rotten Tomatoes score or even the user rating on Rotten Tomatoes doesn't represent the people. It's just of those people. Motorhead, MC5, so this is Patron Torrin. Motorhead, the MC5, Dick Dale, and the Monkees have not been inducted. So I think Patron Torrin is saying like they should be. What do you think about that? Motorhead, MC5, Dick Dale.
I can see an argument about Motorhead, although personally I don't care. The Monkees? Come on. Why would you induct the Monkees?
Why would you what?
Why would you induct the Monkees?
Well, so there are 2 points of view, which I think are both valid. One is that the Monkees were a joke. They were a concoction of Hollywood, or literally, I think. And they didn't really play their instruments. They rarely played their instruments. They rarely wrote their own music. And they're not a real band. They're a concoction of corporations, which today we would say, well, that's kind of typical.
Yeah.
But back then that was really not typical. And no one really considered the Monkees, or very few people considered the Monkees to be like a legitimate band back in the day. The other angle is they absolutely have some mammoth awesome hits. Forget about who wrote them. They often did sing them, at least.
Yeah.
And they ended up learning how to play them.
Yeah.
And they are a massive cultural stepping stone or marker or something of importance, and way more noticeable, and have way more noticeable hits than the Zombies did. So,
sure.
And they're rock and roll, and I don't know.
I wouldn't have inducted the Zombies either, but it's like,
yeah.
I would just feel weird if I'm like, okay, Radiohead, everyone, yay! Okay, up next, the Monkees. It's like, God,
I wouldn't. I have a love-hate relationship with the Monkees in this way, and so there's definitely a part of me.
Which was your favorite album?
I had a bunch of their albums when I was in high school. So I loved the Beatles, right?
Yeah.
And I had no cultural historical context for the Monkees, so I just thought the Monkees were just another band from the '60s.
I know 2 of their songs. One of them I like. I love. The other one I don't.
You know more than that, actually.
I don't think so.
Yeah, I'd have to name them. You probably know 5 or 6 of their songs. You just can't remember them. Preacher Torrin asks, the future of what do you think about the future of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame?
Well, that's going to be weird.
They see, we already have hip hop artists like Tupac in there.
Yeah.
But eventually, do you think crappy bands like Limp Bizkit or artists like P. Diddy or 50 Cent will get in there? Look at the state of rock and roll in recent years. There are very few popular rock and roll bands. And only recent examples I can think of are bands like The Strokes, White Stripes, Rage Against the Machine, Bjork, Nine Inch Nails, Soundgarden, which aren't actually recent. I mean, The Strokes were popular 15 years ago.
Nine Inch Nails was like 30 years.
The White Stripes were popular 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Soundgarden was 30 years ago. So yeah, what do you think about is rock and roll dead?
Yeah. So I mean, growing up, we you probably were the same. whenever you're growing up, you think that what you see around you is sort of steady state. That must be the way the world has been. That's the way the world will be. In that you see the fashions, you see the things that are happening, the patterns, the rhythm of business, so to speak, and you think that's how life is because that's all you know, that's all you see. So I certainly made the assumption growing up that this is how music is. Music is this thing that you have weekly hits that you listen to on the radio, and then there's a few bands that you really get into, and over time, there's one-hit wonders, and then there's bands, and that's how music is. But that's completely different nowadays. Yes, they still have top 40 charts and stuff, but they're sort of meaningless. People consume music in ways never before possible, blah, blah. So music is both dead in the ways that we were accustomed to, and at the same time, it's more alive than it's ever been. So it's a really hard question to answer in the future because, if you ask the random person, like, what are your top, say, 10 new musical acts of this year? That's a really hard question for a lot of people to answer. So some of them don't even know what's come out. Whereas when we were growing up, you could list at least the top 10 of the weekly songs that you liked, and you knew so much about time and place and who was who. That's no longer the case, at least for my generation. Maybe the young kids are with it and still know what's up, but I don't even know what that means. Is it latest YouTube releases? Is it latest movie songs that they've seen? What does it even mean?
It's still tracks that are popular.
That they found how? Where did they find those tracks? It's got to be like Spotify.
The same way we did. I mean, not on the radio per se, but word of mouth.
Yeah, word of mouth, and on Spotify, like on digital medium, right?
And on people sharing and Facebook or Instagram.
A lot less the radio, probably.
Right. But it's similar. I mean, there are definitely songs that 15-year-olds know and they all know. Right. So that we don't know. So,
but what's the rock band that they're all into?
Well, they're not. So, or the very few anyway. So you ask, is rock and roll dead? I don't think so. It's just not popular. There are so many rock bands right now that are not popular, but are still producing, especially when you sort of expand it to alternative rock. There are so many, Tame Impala, for example.
Which is old now.
Yeah, but they're pretty, he's pretty big, and I would call a lot of their music rock. There's just a ton of bands now, but they're not big like they were in the past. In the past, there was a good string there where 20 years, there was at least some version of rock that was in the top 40.
And they don't have the same cultural impact.
Right. But is it dead? No. I mean, in Seattle, you go out to a club, most clubs in Seattle, so Seattle's different than a lot of other cities in that we have a lot of live music per capita. There's a lot of people will just go out, including me, will just go to a bar to watch 4 bands play, and it's almost always quote unquote rock of some form. So it's not dead, and a lot of the bands are young. I mean, we're talking like 21-year-old kids playing rock music or some version thereof, and they're super into it, and they're into the old classics and everything. You know what I mean? So it's not dead. It's just not popular.
Yeah.
The last thing we'll end with is, if the qualification for being inducted is 20 years after the artist's debut album, who else do you think will be nominated in the future? So you're at a disadvantage because, Berto, I actually looked up everyone who was not in who should be in.
Yeah.
But can you think of anyone who you think wouldn't be in who should be in?
So like potential upsets?
Yeah. Because I have a list of 30 artists that I think should absolutely be in who are not in.
All right. Here we go. Stone Temple Pilots.
I don't know if they're in it.
Red Hot Chili Peppers.
I think they're in.
They're in already.
But I don't know.
All right.
It's not on my snub list. Let's just put it that way.
NWA.
I don't know.
Okay. Give me a time frame.
I like these.
Give me a time frame.
Well, it's basically starting in the 60s and going until...
Oh, I see. Not just 20 years ago.
Until through the early 90s.
Oh, I see. Okay. Well, Aha.
Oh, they're probably not in, and they probably deserve it.
Maybe.
I think
such an influential video.
So really, probably the better use of our time is I'm just gonna read these 30, and some of these you're gonna be like,
react to it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Smashing Pumpkins.
Come the fuck on. Why not?
There are a massive, humongous, mega hit rock band.
Yeah.
And they're not.
How?
Now I'm gonna say Elliott Smith.
But wait, what's your hypothesis about Smashing Pumpkins?
That they're not in.
Yeah.
Because the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame has flaws. Like it's a group of people who, are not are not with it. Like the Zombies and Stevie Nicks over Smashing Pumpkins.
What's the next one you said?
Elliott Smith, which I understand. It's
sure. I mean, I love Elliott Smith, but I could kind of understand that.
Also, the Cardigans, which is
that's one of your favorite bands.
And I get that they wouldn't be inducted. But Depeche Mode.
I'm done, man. I can't. Come on. Of all the new wave stuff in the 80s, you got to at least get them in.
Nick Drake, which again I get, like Elliott Smith, not a lot of people are, but Nick Drake is sort of a classic feel.
Well, and sorry for a second, because like Depeche Mode is still touring.
Yeah.
You could say a lot of things about Smashing Pumpkins. They imploded. They did all these things.
They're still touring.
Fine, but they had and they haven't really put out. Depeche Mode still puts out.
Yeah.
And Violator is one of the best albums of all fucking time.
Yeah. Pat Benatar, which seems like...
That's crazy too.
New Order.
I mean, what are we doing to ourselves?
Boston.
Okay. I mean, I'm not as upset, but
I mean, I'm not as upset, but Boston is right down the middle, classic American rock band that had that album was gigantic. The Carpenters.
Oh my God! Come on,
Chubby Checker.
What?
Yeah, Chubby Checker.
Chubby freaking Checker,
who I think just died not too long ago.
That's so egregious, man.
Jim Croce.
Okay, I mean, I love him, but...
The Doobie Brothers.
Wait, no, stop, dude.
Foreigner.
Foreigner had so many hits.
Foreigner's a classic.
So many hits.
I've seen them live, actually. The Guess Who.
Okay.
Carole King.
No, I mean, wait, I don't even understand the logic. Is there a published logic?
Gordon Lightfoot.
Well, how does it work? Do people just vote on it? What?
I don't know.
How does it...
I'm sure it's just...
How does Carole King not get inducted?
The Pixies.
I mean, I love the Pixies, but fine. If you're not going to have Carole King, I'm not going to die on the Pixies hill.
Devo.
Fine.
Devo needs to be in there.
No, Mark Mothersbaugh needs to be in there.
The Smiths.
Fine. I mean, not fine, but fine. If you didn't have New Order in Depeche Mode, get the fuck out.
Judas Priest.
Surprising, but I don't care.
Scorps.
Surprising, but I don't care.
Jane's Addiction. Really
surprising. I definitely care.
Def Leppard.
Oh, that one's really surprising.
Just seems like they would be.
Because at least Depeche Mode and New Order and The Cure, I'm like, yeah, well, you guys probably don't care about that kind of music.
Right.
But freaking, like, pour some sugar on me, like, that's surprising.
Thin Lizzy, which I get, but they should definitely be in there. Bad Brains, which
don't know that
should be in there. They're a black punk band. Bad Company, which was pretty big. Duran Duran.
Oh, come on. The next Beatles? Come on.
And T-Rex.
That one's also really surprising. But Duran Duran?
Yeah.
Even if you somehow debase yourself and don't put Depeche Mode in there. Duran Duran.
Yeah. And the other examples that Torrin gave, the Strokes, which I kind of get maybe in 10 years. White Stripes, again, maybe 10 years.
No, I'm not even having those arguments. If they didn't get those other bands in, I'm done.
Rage Against the Machine definitely should be in there.
Sure.
And Soundgarden should be in there.
Yeah.
For some reason, I think Soundgarden, to people not from Seattle, was like a very distant third to Nirvana and Pearl Jam.
Yeah.
Whereas if in Seattle, Soundgarden was up there with Nirvana and Pearl Jam.
But I feel like Alice in Chains was even bigger than them.
Yeah. And so it's always interesting. It's like the Seattle perception of the grunge scene was different than around the world.
Like for me, out of those bands, Soundgarden was my favorite.
Yeah, especially their later albums.
Yeah.
Got so intricate and melodic but still heavy and
right.
Yeah, Nirvana, I really thought their main Nevermind album was catchy. I liked In Utero a little better.
Yeah.
But I was never like, put me in some Nirvana.
Right. I has super respect for his songwriting.
Yeah.
And there are some songs that I definitely love. I love to hear them. And of course, when Smells Like Teen Spirit came out, it was a moment.
And Pearl Jam, similar. Like, I think with Nirvana and Pearl Jam, I just heard it so much that I never needed to put it in. But I honestly very rarely was like, I need to hear myself some Pearl Jam.
Yeah.
But Soundgarden albums, the last few albums that they had, Super Unknown, Bad Motorfinger, and...
Well, I remember watching Singles, and when he comes on, like he's singing Ritual.
Yeah.
Ritual! I'm like... oh my God, what is this?
Yeah. Well, that does it for that episode of Psychology in Seattle. Thanks for joining us out there. What do you think should be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame? And do you want a picture that Humberto draws for you before the world dies from environmental destruction?
You might want to see the first picture I draw and then make a decision.
But wait, I'm just kidding. Because
you deserve it.